Chapter 1. The Letter. I was supposed to be done with this life. War was a young man's game, quick decisions, hard consequences, and just enough adrenaline to convince you were still alive. But I wasn't young anymore, not in body, not in spirit. I'd spent 20 years running shadow ops across continents no one dares mention in polite conversation. I'd bled for causes that were never mine and buried teammates whose dog tags still echo in my sleep. When I left, I didn't say goodbye, didn't turn in a uniform. There was no parade, no folded flag, just a quiet discharge and a stack of documents stamped classified. I packed what little I had, drove until the noise in my head dulled, and settled in the kind of place where cell towers don't reach and no one asks your last name. Middle Tennessee, Pine Country, where the air smells like wet bark and regret. I lived alone in a two-room cabin I built myself, 27 miles from the nearest gas station and 40 from the edge of my past. My mornings were quiet. Coffee, firewood, the occasional wild turkey passing through like it owned the land. Nights were whiskey and silence. No neighbors, no visits, no need for company when you've got a dozen ghosts that never sleep. But trouble doesn't need an invitation. It finds you all the same. That day was colder than usual. Autumn was biting harder than expected, and the kindling wouldn't catch. I was halfway through chopping down a stubborn pine stump when I saw him, an old postal driver I didn't recognize, inching his way up my long gravel road like he was afraid to disturb something sacred. He stopped short of the gate, didn't honk, didn't wave, just stepped out and held a plain white envelope in one weathered hand like it was ticking. "Nathan Cole?" he asked. I didn't answer, just nodded. He handed it over like it weighed something terrible. "Came priority from Washington," he said. "No return address." I took the envelope, watched him retreat down the road like a man escaping judgment. The tires of his truck kicked up dust, but I never heard them. All I could hear was the beating of my heart, louder than it had been in years. The envelope had a strange weight to it, not physical, but familiar, like the heaviness of dog tags or the chill of old intel that somehow found its way back into the light. My name was written in elegant cursive. No rank, no address, just Nathan Cole. The kind of penmanship that belonged in a different time, a dying art. Maybe that was the point. I sat at my kitchen table, the early light streaking through the blinds like slashes across a confession. I didn't rush to open it. I stared at it first, turned it over, felt the paper. Thick, high quality, government issue or close to it. When I finally broke the seal, something slid out. Not just the letter, a photograph. Old, faded, black and white, frayed at the edges like it had been carried for years. 5 men stood shoulder to shoulder in front of a Blackhawk, mud on their boots, blood in their eyes, all of them geared for a mission. Young, focused, tired, dangerous. And one of them was me. But I had never seen that photo in my life. Chapter 2. Ghosts in the Photograph. I stared at the photo like it was a riddle only I could solve. 5 men in front of a bird that had clearly taken damage. Tail rotor bent, one skid missing, smoke coiling faintly from a panel on the underbelly. Judging by the terrain and the gear, I figured it was taken somewhere in the Syrian borderlands, probably around 2012. Our gear was stripped of insignia, plates rigged tight, nothing that could identify rank or unit. That's how we did it back then. Ghost teams. We operated off the books, no recognition, no record, no rescue. I looked at each face, one by one. First, Trask, Captain James Trask. He was the senior field leader in a joint op that never officially happened. Cool under pressure, always kept a lucky coin tucked behind his belt plate, knew the rules and how to bend them just enough to keep his team breathing. A true operator, one of the few I'd have followed into hell. Next, Mendoza, radio tech, demolitions, and the only guy I ever saw build a claymore from scratch with scrap metal and chewing gum. Sharp tongue, sharper eyes. Then came Keel, the kind of man who thrived on action, always grinning at the edge of chaos. He was quick with a joke and quicker with a trigger. Some thought he was reckless. I thought he was broken in just the right places to survive what we did. Beside him, Dawes, former NSA, brought in to handle intel and psychological mapping. Quiet, calculating, always observing. Some of the younger guys called him the priest, not because he was religious, but because he listened more than he talked. And when he did talk, people shut up and paid attention. Last, Harlow, the youngest of us. Sniper, dead-eye, fast reflexes. We used to call him Whisper because when his rifle spoke, no one ever heard it coming. And then there was me, standing slightly behind them, in the shadows, gear tight, chin tucked, same eyes, same scar beneath the right cheekbone from a busted supply crate during Arctic training. It was definitely me, but I didn't remember the moment. Not the bird, not the photo. It was like seeing your reflection in someone else's mirror. I turned the photo over. On the back, handwritten in block ink, Kobane Ridge, Op Violet Echo, July 19th. Then the 5 names, Trask, Mendoza, Keel, Dawes, Harlow. No mention of me. And then, tucked beneath the photo, the letter, typed, neatly, signed at the bottom in pen. Mr. Cole, my name is Margaret Trask. My husband James passed away 3 days ago from stage 4 pancreatic cancer. In his final hours, he asked me to find you and give you this letter and photograph. He said you were the only man left he could trust. He wouldn't tell me much, only that there were 5 names, that his was the first, and that if I didn't act, the rest would follow. He asked that I tell you this. You were never on the list because you were never supposed to come home. Please, Mr. Cole, if there's any justice left in this world, don't let him be the last. Sincerely, Margaret Trask. I read the letter 3 times. Every word felt like a fragment of something bigger, something buried. I leaned back in my chair and listened to the wind press against the cabin walls, the crackle of the fire, the silence that suddenly didn't feel so safe anymore. Trask was dead, but he'd left a trail, and I was already halfway down it, just by opening that envelope. I poured a glass of bourbon and walked to the safe in my back room. Inside, one sealed case with my old loadout, dusty but intact. Next to it, a drive, titanium-plated, cold to the touch, something I hadn't powered up in nearly 5 years. I connected it to an offline terminal. It blinked, then loaded. A folder appeared. K3 Bravo, 1 file, an old voice recording. I clicked it, and there it was, Trask's voice, gravel in his throat, calm, resigned. If this ever reaches you, Cole, it means they're cleaning house. We were never meant to survive, Echo. They lied. I have proof. Find the others. Finish what we started. And whatever you do, don't trust command. The recording ended in static. I sat in the dark, glass sweating in my hand, mind racing through a dozen names and just as many regrets. I had walked away from this world, but it hadn't walked away from me. Chapter 3. The 5 Names. I didn't sleep that night, couldn't. I kept the photo beside the terminal, stared at it like it might change if I looked hard enough. 5 names, 5 shadows, 1 mission that was never supposed to happen and definitely never supposed to leave survivors. Trask was dead, that much I knew, which meant someone had started crossing names off the list. And if the letter was right, I wasn't on that list because I was never meant to make it home. That fact twisted something in my gut. I thought I had seen betrayal. I thought I had made peace with what we'd done in the dark, but this felt different. This felt surgical. By dawn, I had my plan. First thing I did was secure my perimeter, recalibrated the trail cams, switched the cabin to blackout mode, set 2 counter-surveillance traps on the ridge, motion-triggered, silent alerts that would ping a receiver in my boot if tripped. Then I dusted off my old satellite rig and reached out to the only man I trusted with digital footprints. Flynn. He used to be NSA, back before he found God, or Bitcoin, depending on who you ask. Now he ran blacknet intelligence out of an abandoned radio station in Montana, halfway between nowhere and never. I sent a single-burst transmission on our old channel. Echo status compromised. Need silence check on Trask, Mendoza, Keel, Dawes, Harlow. Immediate. 12 minutes later, I got a ping. Then a voice call, encrypted and scrambled. Jesus, Cole, Flynn said, no hello. You really picked a scab here. Give it to me straight. I ran facial scrape on the names. Trask confirmed KIA. File buried under a private hospice in Arlington. No flag, no ceremony. And the others? Mendoza, off the grid since 2018. Last flagged in Panama under an alias. Could be dead, could be smart. Keel, PMC work, Dubai. Hiring himself out to oligarchs and arms dealers, still active. I felt something shift in my chest. What about Dawes? Flynn hesitated. That one's tricky. He was NSA, remember? Burned himself trying to whistleblow some classified AI stuff 4 years ago. Ended up suspended. Now he's under federal psychiatric evaluation. Claimed he was being reprogrammed. Where? Langley Safe House. Tightly monitored. Off limits to civilians. And Harlow? A pause. Then another. I've got nothing. No death cert, no pension records, no surveillance. It's like he vanished the day after Echo. Or like he was taken. I laid out the names on the cabin table. Trask, dead. Mendoza, vanished. Keel, thriving. Dirty. Dawes, locked down. Harlow, ghost. The photo was the only map I had. Each of these men was part of something the government never wanted uncovered, and the deeper I dug, the more it looked like they were erasing evidence, one operator at a time. I ran a tactical pattern check. If I were the cleaner assigned to wipe Echo, I'd start with the ones easiest to erase. Trask was already sick, low risk. Mendoza was hidden in soft territory, no allies. Dawes? Discredited, institutionalized, easy prey. That left Keel, the only one arrogant enough to stay in plain sight. And if I was next, well, I wasn't planning to make it easy. Flynn dropped another file into my secure inbox. Consider this a parting gift, he said. What is it? A declassified satellite image from Kobane. Time-stamped a few hours after Echo went silent. Shows a second extraction bird. Different ID tag than ours. You're saying, I'm saying someone else was on the ground. Someone not in our chain of command. And they got out. He paused. One more thing. I dug up an old memo buried in a DARPA archive. Precursor to Echo. A phrase popped up more than once. What phrase? Project Obsidium. The word hit like a hammer the ribs. Obsidium. I hadn't heard it in years. A black-tier behavioral warfare program rumored to be shelved after ethical breaches. The kind of thing whispered about in green rooms and killed in committee meetings. On paper. But if Echo was Obsidium's test run, then the real enemy wasn't in a foreign land. It was inside our own chain of command. I closed the terminal, sat back, and exhaled slowly. I had 5 names, a dead man's letter, and a war that had never really ended. Only difference now, I wasn't following orders. I was writing my own. The mission that never happened. We called it Violet Echo, but the paperwork never used that name. On record, it didn't exist. No mission number, no timestamp, no after-action report, the kind of op that left no trace, not even among the ghosts who pulled the trigger. But I remembered the scent of scorched sand, the sound of radio static humming through my headset as the team dropped below the ridge. I remembered the strange silence that followed, the kind that doesn't settle naturally, not in combat. Something about that op had never sat right with me. And now, with Trask dead and the others scattered like broken chess pieces, I was ready to find out why. The mission, as we were briefed, was simple. Too simple. We were told we were neutralizing a rogue asset trafficking enriched uranium between the remnants of the Syrian resistance and a private terror financier. High stakes, high value. Go in, pull the plug, extract quietly. But there were problems from the start. Trask had questioned the target profile. "Where's the intel coming from?" he asked the night before the op. The handler shrugged. "Joint Task SIGINT." That was the first red flag. Joint SIGINT usually played middleman to multiple agencies, CIA, DIA, NSA. But this came direct from a DARPA contact. No operational control, no verification protocol. Second red flag, our bird had a civilian pilot. Never got a name, just a call sign Valentine. Too clean, too fast, too easy. We were dropped on the northern slope of Kobane Ridge under moonless cover. 5-man team, 1 overwatch. I was eyes on from the hill with a Barrett MRAD and full thermal suite. The rest of the team moved on foot. I watched them fan out in perfect formation. No words, just signals. The compound was quiet. Too quiet. Then everything went wrong. First comms dropped, all at once. No static, no scramble, just dead air. I switched frequencies. Nothing. Then came the flashes. Bright, quick, controlled. Not from firefight patterns, charges. I radioed for evac, but Valentine was gone. The bird was off radar less than 3 minutes after the first detonation. I had a choice, descend and help, or stay back and survive. I stayed. Not because I was a coward, because the silence told me the truth. We'd been set up. I never saw Mendoza again after that day. Never saw Dawes. Keel made it out, but we were separated during exfil. Trask? He showed up months later in D.C., gaunt, shaken, looking over his shoulder like death was riding shotgun. He never spoke about the mission, never said why he disappeared or how he made it out. He just looked me in the eye once and said, "Don't dig, Cole. Not this time." Then he disappeared again, until the letter. Back at my cabin, I pulled out my old ops journal. Not the official one, the real one. Handwritten notes in military shorthand, full of dates, locations, and questions I was never allowed to ask. I flipped to the tab marked E7 Violet. It was thinner than most. Too thin. Which was strange because I remembered more. A briefing, a second handler, a coded file that didn't match the mission specs. And most of all, I remembered the sound. Right before comms went dark. Not gunfire, not voices, something deeper. A frequency. Low, subsonic. Like a hum that didn't belong. I wrote it off as nerves for years. But now, it made too much sense. I called Flynn. "Scan for any classified DARPA documents referencing Project Obsidian," I said. "Specifically audio manipulation or frequency-based neural interference." He didn't even ask why. 15 minutes later, he responded with a data file. Inside were fragments of a program profile labeled Obsidian, behavioral control through sensory deprivation and pulse-induced obedience. The description chilled me. Test groups exposed to low-frequency neural pulses exhibit increased obedience, reduced memory retention, and suppressed emotional responses to violent stimuli. Results inconclusive for long-term deployment. Recommend trial integration in live combat scenario with classified field team Echo 7. We weren't there to stop a uranium transfer. We were the test. I stood in my cabin, wind howling through the gaps in the siding, and realized something horrifying. The mission didn't fail. It succeeded. They were testing how much control they could exert, and how completely they could erase it from us afterward. Now, with Trask gone, someone was erasing the rest of the evidence, which meant I had a target list, 5 names, and someone needed to pay for each one. Chapter 5. Friendly Fire. Revenge isn't a strategy, not by itself, but it is a hell of a motivator. Once I confirmed the mission was a behavioral warfare test, and we were the subjects, not the soldiers, I knew what had to be done. The names weren't just memories anymore. They were evidence, and the longer they stayed alive, the more dangerous it became for whoever ran the show. If I wanted the truth, I had to move fast. I started with the most exposed link in the chain, Keel. Flynn pulled up Keel's last ping. He was working out of a private military compound outside Dubai, subcontracting for an Eastern European energy conglomerate that doubled as a laundering front for sanctioned arms sales. Classic Keel. Always knew how to ride the gray zone between patriot and mercenary, between loyalty and a fat paycheck. I booked a flight under a burner alias and landed in country with a cold wind at my back. Dust storms were pushing in from the desert, coating everything in a layer of grit. It felt right. Dirty mission, dirty place. I posed as a buyer, US-based security firm looking to hire talent for offshore protection gigs. The front company Flynn spun up was convincing enough to get me past the gates. Private sector money talks louder than morality. The compound was a fortress. Steel fencing, armored SUVs, ex-military guards with Israeli weapons and no name tags. Half the guys looked like they hadn't been stateside in a decade. The kind of men who didn't blink when bullets flew. But Keel? He looked like he was thriving, leaner than I remembered. Tighter jaw. Same eyes. Sharp. Calculating. Wearing a designer tactical shirt, like he'd just stepped out of a PMC catalog. He shook my hand like we hadn't once bled together on a Syrian ridgeline. "Nathan Cole," he said with a smile. "Damn. Heard you vanished into the woods. Figured you were either dead or living in a bunker." "Both," I said. He laughed. "I'm surprised you tracked me down. Thought you wanted nothing to do with the past." "I don't," I said. But the past came knocking. We met in a private briefing room lined with gun racks and surveillance monitors. Every angle of the compound was under constant watch. I swept for bugs, found two, crushed them both. He raised an eyebrow. "Paranoid much?" I just stared at him. "Violet Echo," I said. His smile vanished. The tension changed, like someone sucked the air out of the room. "You're digging in dangerous soil, Nate." I got a letter from Trask. "Trask is dead." He left instructions, proof, names. Keel leaned back in his chair, fingers laced across his chest. Should have burned that letter. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the photograph, the one from the envelope, laid it flat on the table between us. 5 faces, 1 lie. "Did you know?" I asked. He didn't respond at first. Then, quietly. "I knew it wasn't what they said it was, but I didn't know what it really was." "You knew they were experimenting." "I suspected," he said, "and I wasn't the only one. But by the time the mission went live, we were in too deep, and when it went bad, we were all on borrowed time." "And Mendoza?" "Gone. Ghosted years ago." "Harlow?" Keel's face twitched. "What about Harlow?" He looked me dead in the eye. "You don't want that answer." Wrong thing to say. I stood. Keel reached for his sidearm. I moved first, grabbed his wrist, slammed it against the table, drove a forearm into his throat. The gun clattered across the floor. My knee pinned his chest as I brought my knife to his cheek. "You were in on it," he wheezed. "I wasn't. I swear they offered me a way out. That's it. Walk away. No loose ends." "Except me," he nodded. "They said you were already dead, that Trask burned the list before you made it back. And the ones who didn't walk away?" He said nothing. "Tell me who's cleaning house." Keel groaned. "General Whitaker. He was overseeing the op. Pentagon brass now, promoted right after Echo. Said anyone who talked would get the same treatment as Trask." "Is Whitaker behind Obsidian?" Keel coughed. "I don't know who's behind it, but he was the one running logistics, and he's not alone. Contractors, defense contractors, biotech companies, everyone's in on it." "And you just watched it happen?" "I wanted out. Too late." I punched him once, just hard enough to drop him. He slumped against the wall, wheezing. I didn't kill him. Killing him would have been a mercy. I left the compound that night with a fire in my chest I hadn't felt since the sandbox. Rage mixed with clarity. Now I had a real name. General Whitaker. A decorated officer, a respected strategist, and a war criminal hiding behind ribbons and rank. The man who gave the order, and the next one on my list. Chapter 6. The Widow's Truth. I couldn't go after a general without context. CHEL gave me a name, but I needed more than a man to blame. I needed a trail, one that couldn't be swept away under a carpet of national security and patriotic doublespeak. And there was only one person left who might have it: the widow. Margaret Trask lived on the outskirts of Arlington, Virginia, in a modest colonial home tucked into a quiet cul-de-sac of red brick and white shutters. The kind of neighborhood where flags still hung from porches and the lawn was always clipped short. Perfect, patriotic, clean. It made me uneasy. I parked down the street and approached on foot, no weapons in hand, just the photograph and Trask's voice echoing in my head. She answered the door almost immediately, like she'd been expecting me. "Nathan Cole," she said. Her voice was soft, worn by grief. Her face carried lines that weren't just from age. They were the kind carved by secrets and years of silence. She looked at me like she was seeing a story she'd only heard whispered about. "Come in." Her living room was like stepping into another time. Lace doilies, military memorabilia, a folded flag in a glass case on the mantel. But it was the pictures that caught my attention. Not of Trask in uniform, those were expected. It was the candid ones, smiling in the backyard, holding hands at a parade, laughing at something off camera. This wasn't a man who died as a ghost. This was someone who lived, even after he came back. "You knew," I said. "You knew the mission wasn't what they told you." She nodded. "He never said it outright. He couldn't. But after that deployment, he was never the same. He stopped talking in his sleep, stopped reacting to loud noises, started locking doors from the inside, even when it was just the two of us." "Classic PTSD?" I froze. "Harlow, alive?" The last log showed Trask holding up a photo, one of the five of us, but someone's face had been blurred out, digitally erased, like they were scrubbing history in real time. I copied everything, secured it in 3 separate drives, 2 offline and 1 hidden on a classified satellite mirror Flynn had access to. Then I burned the original. I wouldn't let them trace this back to her. I was done waiting for answers. I had proof, I had a name, and now I had leverage. Chapter 7. Dead Ends and Cold Trails. There's a moment in every hunt where the trail goes cold. That moment had arrived. I had names, I had recordings, I had the truth carved into data that no one in government wanted to acknowledge. But I didn't have a next step. Keel was neutralized, more useful alive than dead. Margaret Trask was in hiding, tucked away in a safe house outside Atlanta under Flynn's watch. The flash drive she gave me had confirmed everything we feared about Project Obsidian. But it hadn't told me how to stop it, only how it began. The footage of Harlow haunted me. Trask's voice replayed in my mind. Harlow wasn't killed, he was taken. I saw it happen. I remembered the op, what little was left of it. And I remembered the moment we lost visual contact with Harlow. 1 second he was covering the rear, the next he was just gone. We assumed it was crossfire, a clean kill, quiet. But if he'd been taken, if his memory, hell, if his mind was being tampered with, that meant someone was still running experiments, and they weren't done with us. I needed to find Dawes. He was the one guy on the list who might still have enough clarity to make sense of what came next. He was also the one person under constant surveillance, a national asset under psychological watch, according to the brief Flynn intercepted. Translation: he knew too much. They didn't want him dead. They wanted him quiet. He'd been living in a controlled environment in a federal care facility on the outskirts of Langley, Virginia, just a few miles from the same buildings that orchestrated black ops across the globe. The irony wasn't lost on me. Breaking in wasn't the hard part. Getting out with Dawes intact? That would be another story. I reconned the site over 2 days. A low-profile, secure residential facility dressed up as a civilian mental health clinic. But I knew the signs. Mil-spec fencing behind hedges, optical sensors hidden in parking meters, infrared beacons on the roof masked as HVAC units. This wasn't a hospital, it was a vault. Dawes was in room 312B under the name David Owen. No visitors, no online presence. Monitored 24/7 by 2 plainclothes federal agents pretending to be orderlies. But they weren't watching the roof. Rookies. I breached just after midnight. The building rotated shift changes every 7 hours, not 8, which meant some brilliant bureaucrat thought breaking pattern would improve unpredictability. It didn't. It gave me a window. I bypassed the 4th-floor fire escape, rappelled down 2 stories, and cut through a maintenance duct just wide enough to crawl through without losing a rib. Room 312B was pitch dark, no cameras inside, just 2 pressure sensors in the floor aisles, standard issue for high-risk subjects. I disabled them in 6 seconds flat. Dawes was asleep. or at least pretending. "Dawes," I whispered. His eyes opened slowly, and he smiled. "I was wondering when you'd come," he said. He hadn't aged much. Maybe it was the meds. Maybe it was the trauma freezing him in time. But he looked like a man who'd been waiting in purgatory. "Do you know who I am?" I asked. "Nathan Cole," he said instantly. "Echo Team, Violet Ridge. You were never on the list." The words chilled me. He remembered, even through the haze. I helped him sit up. "You said they were reprogramming you." "They tried. Didn't take." He tapped his temple. "Had an implant, memory chip, experimental, designed to filter out trauma and store data externally. But they never accounted for fragmentation. I started dreaming in reverse, remembering things I shouldn't." "Harlow?" He nodded. "They took him. Not killed, not wiped. They used him." "For what?" Dawes looked me dead in the eye. "To prove they could rewrite a soldier's purpose, take a sniper trained to eliminate threats, and make him believe his friends were the enemy." I felt bile rise in my throat. "Where is he?" "I don't know, but I know who might." Dawes handed me a folded piece of paper from beneath his pillow. Written in shaky pen was a name I hadn't heard in over a decade. Dr. Lowell Bishop. DARPA, Behavioral Warfare, the architect of neural obedience trials, gone dark after Echo, rumored dead. But Dawes didn't believe in rumors. "He's the key," Dawes said. "Find Bishop, and you'll find the truth. About Harlow, about the protocol, about everything." "What about you?" He smiled faintly. "I'm already dead, Cole, just not buried." I left through the roof, left no trace. By the time the orderlies found Dawes asleep in his bed, the only thing they'd notice was a slight twitch in the cameras, 10 seconds of static they'd write off as electrical interference. But I knew better. The war had just escalated. And now, the man who built the machine was back on the board. Next objective, find Bishop, and hope I got there before someone else found me. Chapter 8. One by one. You can't kill a machine by shooting at its gears. You go for the power source. For me, that source was Dr. Lowell Bishop, the man who created the neural compliance model behind Project Obsidian, the man who designed the protocol that made soldiers forget who they were and follow orders even after they stopped making sense. If Obsidian was the gun, Bishop was the hand that pulled the trigger. The only problem? He was supposed to be dead. Officially, he died in a car crash in 2016. Single vehicle accident, burned too badly to identify. But the more I dug, the more I realized it was the perfect kind of death for someone who didn't want to be found. Burned bodies don't ask questions. Flynn ran every alias Bishop had ever used, came back with a pattern. 8 months before his death, Bishop had purchased land in Nevada, a stretch of desert registered to a shell corporation based in the Cayman Islands. Flynn traced the money to a federal biomedical grant earmarked for trauma resilience research. Translation: the government had funded his escape and buried the trail, but not well enough. I made it to the Nevada border in 48 hours, driving a stolen GMC with false plates and a handheld radio that scanned for unencrypted federal bands. I kept my head down, my beard scruffy, and my thoughts focused. The desert was a good place to disappear. Plenty of sun, no neighbors. And when you bury a secret in sand, you don't expect it to rise again. But that's the thing about secrets. They don't stay buried. Not when I'm digging. The compound was small, 2 Quonset huts, a perimeter fence, and a wind turbine on the edge of the bluff. No guards, no visible cameras. But I knew surveillance when I saw it. There were motion sensors buried beneath the gravel, pressure plates beneath the walkway, and a faint electrical hum coming from the ground. Shielded EMF field, designed to block signal tracking. This wasn't a hideout. It was a lab, still active. I waited until nightfall, then I went in. I bypassed the south fence, crawled beneath the drainage runoff, and used a military-grade jammer to block outbound signals. If someone tried to call for help, they'd hear nothing but static. Inside the first hut were computers, old, dust-covered, but active. One screen displayed rotating files, neural scan data, chemical sequences, timestamps. The file headers were chilling. Subject MN4, obedience reinforcement/memory looping. Subject D9, moral suppression trial. Subject B6, long-term fragmentation. Then I saw it. A video log labeled simply, Harlow, final phase. I hit play, and watched my brother in arms erase himself. He was strapped to a chair, eyes open but empty. A voice off screen, cold, clinical, asked him, "What is your name?" Silence. "Who are your enemies?" Harlow blinked once, then said, "Nathan Cole, James Trask, Dawes, Keel, Mendoza." I stepped back, breath caught in my throat. They'd made him forget, made him believe we were the targets, and if he was still alive, they might have sent him after me. I shut the video off. Now, and that's when I heard the voice behind me. "You weren't supposed to see that." I turned, slow and deliberate. Dr. Lowell Bishop stood in the doorway, older, thinner, but unmistakable. His hair was white now, tied back. Glasses, lab coat, a scalpel in his right hand. I raised my pistol. "Where is he?" He smiled. "Which version?" "Don't play games." "Oh, I'm not. You're thinking of Harlow like a fixed identity, but Obsidian changed that. He's not who you remember. He's something new, a tool sharpened by fear, a weapon with a familiar face. You turned him into a killer." "No," Bishop said. "You did. I just taught him who the enemy was. I didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. I needed more." "Why?" I asked. "Why turn on your own people?" Bishop didn't flinch. "Because loyalty is the last unreliable variable in warfare. You train soldiers to fight, but you can't train them to obey without question. Not forever. Obsidian removed that limitation. You turned warriors into drones. I liberated them from conscience." I stepped forward, gun raised. "Where is he now?" Bishop smiled, and for the first time, I saw fear flicker beneath his bravado. "You're too late. He's already in motion. Target acquisition was finalized 36 hours ago." "Target?" He didn't answer, so I pulled the trigger. One shot to the leg. He screamed, crumpled, tried to crawl. I knelt beside him. "Who's the target, Bishop?" His lips trembled. He looked up at me and whispered, "You." That's when the lights went out. Literally. The power cut. Backup battery systems clicked on. Then I heard it. A single footstep behind me. No voice, no warning, just the soft, unmistakable sound of a bolt sliding into a chamber. And a voice I hadn't heard in years. "You should have stayed dead, Cole." Chapter 9. The Fourth Operator. He stepped out of the shadows like a phantom. Same height, same build, same eyes, only hollow now. Glassy, unfeeling, like whatever made him human had been scraped away and replaced with precision. Mike Harlow. The last name on the photo. The last ghost from Echo. Only he wasn't dead. He was standing 10 feet away from me, rifle raised, locked in, and he was aiming straight for my heart. "Mike!" I said. No answer. He tilted his head slightly like he was trying to identify me, not by face but by behavioral cue. "Put the weapon down," I said. Still nothing. He moved slowly, methodically, tactical glide, no wasted motion, every step calculated like a machine working through code. I lowered my sidearm and raised both hands. "It's me, Cole. You remember, don't you?" His eyes twitched, just barely. Then his voice, flat as steel. "I was told you'd say that." I shifted my stance slightly. Just enough to angle toward cover. "I don't want to fight you," I said. "I don't even want answers anymore. I just want to bring you home." He blinked. Another twitch. Somewhere, deep down, I could feel something was still alive in there. A spark buried under layers of obedience and conditioning. "Trask is dead," I said. "Mendoza vanished. Dawes is locked away. Keel, he sold us out." No reaction. "They wiped us, Mike. They turned you into a weapon. But you're not a program. You're my brother." Silence. Then, "You were compromised." His finger began to tighten on the trigger. I moved first, not to shoot, to dive. The shot cracked through the air, slicing past my ribs and embedding in the steel panel behind me. I rolled, came up fast, and aimed low, non-lethal. I couldn't kill him. Not Harlow, not like this. I fired, one round to the thigh. He staggered, dropped to one knee. Another shot cracked, wild this time. He wasn't in control, not fully. He was fighting something inside. I lunged and tackled him. We crashed to the floor, our weapons skidding across the concrete. Fists collided. Elbows, blood. Years of training spilled out in raw instinct. Two warriors bound by history, now clashing like strangers. But I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to wake him up. I drove my knee into his chest and shouted, "Mike, snap out of it!" He grabbed my collar, fists clenched, breath shallow. Then his eyes flickered, confusion, pain, recognition. Cole? My chest nearly collapsed from the sound of it. He blinked again as if surfacing from underwater. What? What did they do to me? I leaned back, blood dripping from my lip. They turned you against us, against yourself. He looked around the lab, dazed. The body of Dr. Bishop lay slumped behind us, still bleeding from the leg. Monitors flashed error codes, files corrupted, obsidian was crumbling. I remember voices, Harlow whispered, and pain, but then nothing, just orders. You're not alone anymore, I said. They thought you were a weapon. I'm going to prove them wrong. He nodded slowly. Then everything lit up red. Emergency sirens, trip sensors. The jamming signal had failed. They knew we were here, and they were coming. I helped Harlow to his feet, grabbed both weapons, and triggered the facility's purge sequence. The files, the evidence, the test logs, they'd all be gone in 10 minutes. But not before I uploaded what I could to Flynn. I sent one message. Subject MN-4 recovered, obsidian exposed, package en route. Then I looked at Harlow. Can you move? He smiled weakly. I've got one bullet left in me. I nodded. Let's make it count. We disappeared into the desert, not as fugitives, but as survivors. They created a monster, but now that monster was mine to protect and maybe, just maybe, to restore. One ghost down, more to go. Chapter 10. Echoes from the Cage. The desert swallowed us whole. Harlow and I moved through the rocky outcroppings like ghosts, just like we'd been trained. Silent, controlled, predators when needed, shadows when not. Except this time, we weren't the hunters. We were the prey. We found shelter in an abandoned mining shack 4 miles from Bishop's facility. A rusting tin coffin barely standing against the wind, but it had a roof, a door, and no digital signature. That was enough. Harlow collapsed onto a crate, breathing heavy, clutching his leg. You stitched this before, he muttered through clenched teeth. Probably twice, I said, pulling out my med kit. He hissed as I cleaned the wound. Still hurts, he said. That's good. Means you're still in there. We didn't speak for a while, just listened to the silence, the kind of silence that lives in the cracks of old buildings and forgotten lives. Then he broke it. They told me you were dead. Same. They said Trask was a traitor, that Mendoza turned. They said a lot of things. Were they true? No, I said. None of it. He looked down, fingers twitching slightly. I dreamed about you. Not like dreams. More like flickers. Images. You were holding a rifle. I was bleeding. You said something. What did I say? I don't remember, but I felt it. Like whatever they put in my head couldn't delete the emotion. Good, I said. That means they didn't finish the job. He gave a weak smile. Still want to kill me? Not today. Thanks. I stared at the floorboards, trying to process it all. Obsidian wasn't just mind control. It was memory manipulation at the cellular level. They weren't just reprogramming instincts. They were rewriting identity. Trask tried to expose it and died of cancer weeks after. Dawes was locked in a psych ward for delusional episodes. Keel made a deal with the devil to save his own skin. And Harlow was the prototype. I saw the footage, I told him. You said I was the enemy. I didn't mean it. I know. But part of me still felt it. Even just now, when I saw you in that lab, my first instinct was to kill. Obsidian runs deeper than instinct. It weaponized recognition, changed your reflexes. He looked at me, eyes like flint. Can it be reversed? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. The wind howled through the cracks in the wall. I handed him a protein bar. He tore it open with shaky hands. "We need to get to Flynn," I said. "He's got resources, can dig through what we pulled from Bishop's system, maybe find where the program went next. And after that, we expose it." Harlow exhaled, long, slow. Then he looked at me. "If we go public, they'll kill us." "They already tried." He nodded. "Then we hit first." That was the moment I knew. The real Harlow wasn't gone. He was just buried, and piece by piece, he was clawing his way back. I stayed awake that night, watching the horizon for dust trails or black choppers. But the desert stayed quiet, almost too quiet, like someone was waiting, letting us believe we'd escaped. But war doesn't end when the gunfire stops. Sometimes, that's just when the real battle begins. Chapter 11. Fire in the Silence. By morning, we were ghosts again. Harlow wrapped his leg with duct tape and grit, refusing to limp more than necessary. I respected it. He wasn't the same man they captured, but he wasn't the man they left behind either. He was something new, a survivor born from betrayal, just like me. We moved northeast, ditching the mining shack before satellites or heat sensors could find us. I'd spent too many years watching how assets were tracked to fall for that mistake. Our faces were burned into a dozen agencies by now, but our movements, those were still our own. We hitched a ride with a long-haul trucker hauling copper through Arizona, paid in cash, used burner names, slept in the back beside pallets of stripped wire and oil drums that smelled like gasoline and lost years. I kept my rifle close. Harlow kept his silence closer. 3 nights later, we reached the edge of Flagstaff. Flynn had set up a temporary safe house, an old ranger station turned digital fortress deep in the mountains, solar-powered, off-grid, camouflaged to look like a historical landmark. Inside, it was all server hum and encryption protocols. Flynn didn't even open the door when we knocked. He just spoke through a speaker. "If either of you brought a tracking device, I swear I'll melt your bones." "Love you too," I said. The door buzzed open. Flynn looked worse than I remembered. Scruffy beard, pale from months indoors, bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept since the Cold War. He looked at Harlow and froze. "You weren't supposed to exist." Harlow raised an eyebrow. "Most days I still don't." Flynn turned to me. "What the hell are you dragging through my door, Cole?" "Proof," I said. "That Obsidian isn't done, that Harlow was their prototype, that Bishop wasn't the end." Flynn exhaled, hands on hips. "You always bring me problems. And you always solve them." He cracked a smile. "Fair." We spent the next 6 hours digging. Flynn decrypted Bishop's hard drive with something he called a brute force whisperer, a hybrid AI that cracked defense-grade encryption in a quarter of the time without leaving digital footprints. What we found wasn't just evidence. It was a war map. Project Obsidian hadn't been shut down. It had evolved under a new code name. Directive Ashfall. It was global now. Dozens of field tests in Eastern Europe. Psychological conditioning units embedded in allied forces. A subroutine running through military training simulations in domestic bases, targeting recruits. Worse, there was a name attached to the final rollout phase, a signature. General Whitaker. Same man Trask had flagged, the same man who promoted Bishop, then buried him. I leaned over the screen, jaw locked. "Where is he?" Flynn tapped a few keys. "Pentagon. But that's not where you'll get him." "Where then?" Flynn pulled up a black-tie gala invitation. Whitaker was the keynote speaker for a defense innovation event in D.C., public, high security, but not untouchable. Press would be there, foreign observers, congressional aides, the perfect place for a spectacle. I smiled. "Then that's where we finish this." Harlow looked at me. You planning to put a bullet in him? Maybe. And if that makes us the enemy? I paused. We already are. Outside, the wind picked up. It didn't carry dust this time. It carried purpose, the kind you don't shake off, the kind that burns quietly until it explodes. We weren't just running anymore. We were aiming. And for the first time since I opened that envelope, I felt like we were winning. Chapter 12. The Truth He Inherited. Truth isn't just data. It's blood. It's names etched into walls that don't exist on any map. It's memories they tried to wipe, crawling back to the surface like fire ants, angry, impossible to ignore. And now, that truth had a name. General Whitaker. He wasn't just a flag and medals officer. He was one of those invisible hands that moved whole wars with PowerPoints and classified funding. A man who signed off on death like others signed birthday cards. And he had turned Project Obsidian into something worse, Directive Ashfall, a fully funded psychological warfare program embedded inside the Department of Defense. Flynn traced the contracts, layer after layer of shell companies, NGO partnerships, and think tank advisory boards. None of it tied directly to Whitaker, but it all ended up in the same budget. The numbers didn't lie, and neither did the body count. He's going to finish the rollout next quarter, Flynn said, staring at the screen. They're already testing the protocols on basic trainees, lowering impulse resistance, instilling blind compliance. If he pulls this off, we'll have soldiers who won't ask what the mission is. They'll just do it, I said. Harlow leaned forward. That's not military. That's slavery. Flynn nodded. And guess who's pushing it through Congress? Defense lobbyists, tech contractors, medical firms. They're all in bed together. And no one knows, I said. Flynn shrugged. Even if they did, no one would believe them. I looked down at the folder on the table. Inside was Whitaker's itinerary. The gala was 3 nights away. Location: the Capitol Vista Hotel, Washington, D.C. Keynote speech, 9 p.m. Guest list: senators, generals, journalists, CEOs. Security: private contractors with federal clearance. Live stream. Yes. Opportunity: 1. I'm not going in to kill him, I said. That's what they'll expect. A sniper shot. A ghost strike. Flynn raised an eyebrow. Then what? We expose him, I said. Live, on air, documents, videos, names. You'll never make it out. Don't care. Harlow stepped forward. Then we go together. I turned to him. You sure? They stole my mind, my years, my name. I won't let them steal you too. We spent the next 2 days prepping. Burner phones, portable transmitters, scrambled IDs for building access. Flynn embedded a kill switch in our media files. If anything happened to us, every byte of data would upload to every independent journalist, whistleblower network, and intelligence leaker Flynn had on the hook. The story would go viral, even if we died for it. The night before the gala, I sat alone in the safe house with the Trask letter in my hand. The one Margaret had sent. His words haunted me. You were never on the list because you were never supposed to come home. But I had come home. To a home that didn't recognize me. To a flag I once saluted, now folded behind glass. To a country that turned warriors into test subjects. I folded the letter gently and tucked it into my vest. If I didn't walk out of that hotel, that letter would be the last thing I ever carried, the truth I inherited, the reason I couldn't stop now. Outside, Harlow sat on the edge of the porch, eyes on the stars like he was trying to remember where he came from. You ever think about who we used to be? He asked. All the time. You think we can be that again? I took a long breath. No, but we can make sure no one else has to become what we did. He nodded. That's enough. And in the stillness, I believed him. Chapter 13. Harlow's Choice. The plan was never elegant, but it was precise. Flynn had rigged a mobile broadcast unit inside a briefcase, equipped with a live streaming uplink, signal scrambler, and a firewall that would make the NSA sweat. If we could get close enough to the main stage at the gala, we could hijack the feed. Then we'd go live. Trask's recordings, the Obsidian footage, Whitaker's own voice signing off on neural compliance tests, everything. The Capitol Vista Hotel was the kind of building where ambition and corruption held hands. Marble floors, mirrored elevators, and too many cameras masked as chandeliers. I wore a tailored suit and carried the briefcase like I was one of them. Harlow dressed in a sleek black tux, hair slicked, collar tight. He looked like a man who belonged. No one could see the ghost beneath his skin. Flynn operated from a van parked 3 blocks away, tapping into security feeds and local network nodes. Once you activate the stream, he warned, you'll have 5, maybe 6 minutes before every signal jammer in DC lights up. That's your window. 6 minutes, I repeated. That's all we need. We slipped through the main lobby unnoticed. The crowd was a cocktail of power. Senators in expensive shoes, defense contractors with blood on their hands, generals sipping scotch, and journalists too seduced by the open bar to ask real questions. And at the center of it all, General Whitaker, smiling, shaking hands, bathing in admiration, like a man who'd never known consequence. He was everything I remembered, and nothing I respected. We took our position near the side stage. Harlow carried the decoy phone. I carried the stream device. Flynn patched in over comms. "Mic's hot, signal's strong. Give me a line and I'll blow this roof open." I nodded. Then it happened. The lights dimmed, the music stopped, and Whitaker took the podium. He began with patriotism, talked about sacrifice, about progress, about new frontiers in national defense. And then he said it. The phrase that lit every nerve in my body. Project Obsidian taught us that the mind is the final battlefield, that loyalty can be engineered and hesitation can be eliminated for the good of the mission. He said it like a victory, like betrayal was a bullet point on a slideshow. That was our cue. I stepped onto the stage from the side entrance, briefcase in hand. I could hear gasps, guards moving, but not fast enough. I opened the case, hit the trigger on Flynn's remote, and suddenly, every screen in the ballroom glitched. Then played. Trask's voice, the therapy videos, Bishop's dying confession, Harlow's footage, the moment he forgot who he was. The silence in that ballroom was louder than any explosion I'd ever heard. People froze, hands over mouths, eyes wide. Whitaker turned to face me. Color drained from his face. "You," he growled. "You don't know what you've done." "I do," I said. "I finally made you visible." He lunged for the mic. I drew first. Not my gun, just the truth. This is the face of the war you hid. These are the names you erased. We were soldiers. You made us slaves. Then, gunfire. Not from me, from the balcony. One shot, fast, clean, headed straight for me. But before it reached, Harlow stepped between us. The round tore into his chest. He hit the floor, hard. I fired back. The shooter dropped, but it didn't matter. I ran to Harlow, knelt beside him, blood flooding his tux. His breathing was shallow. "You said you weren't gonna let them hate me again," he whispered. "I'm not," I said, hand pressing the wound. "Stay with me." He looked up at the ceiling, smiled. "They tried to kill me once. Not this time." Then, he closed his eyes, and the world stopped. Security stormed the room. Flynn's failsafe kicked in, blasting the footage across every major outlet, blog, podcast, social media feed. Whitaker was arrested before he reached the exit. But all I could see was my brother. He chose me over instinct, over programming. He chose freedom, and he died proving that no code could replace the human soul. Chapter 14. The Blood We Share. They buried Harlow at Arlington, not as a subject, not as a number, but as a soldier. A folded flag, 21 guns. A ceremony none of them deserved to attend, but they came anyway. Every suit and badge who once approved the budget that erased his name now lined up to pay lip service to his sacrifice. I didn't wear my uniform. I didn't speak. I just watched and remembered. The media storm lasted weeks. The Obsidian files went global. Investigations launched. Congressional hearings filled with words like rogue agency, unauthorized trials, and patriotic concern. Whitaker was indicted. Flynn leaked everything before the DOJ could redact it. But justice? Justice was slower, messier. It always is. Some claimed the recordings were deep fakes. Others said it was anti-military propaganda. Some even called me a terrorist. But the truth had already spread, and you can't kill the truth once it breathes. Margaret Trask sent me a letter. No envelope, just handwriting I recognized. He came home after all, not how I prayed for, but whole in the only way that mattered. Thank you, Mr. Cole, for honoring the promise my husband couldn't keep, and for finishing what they tried to bury. M.T. I read it once, then I burned it, not out of anger, but because some promises don't belong in the world anymore. Some promises are sacred, better kept in smoke and memory. Flynn disappeared after the hearings. His safe house went cold, his network went dark, but I know he's still out there, watching, helping, making sure no one else builds another Obsidian. As for me, I went back to the cabin, the woods, the silence, but I wasn't the same man who left it. I carry their names now: Trask, Mendoza, Dawes, Keel, and Harlow. The operator who gave his life to prove he still had a soul. They say soldiers don't cry, but that's a lie. They cry when no one's looking, when the mission ends and the silence creeps in, when the blood on your hands belongs to someone who called you brother. I'm not done fighting. I never will be, because there are still shadows, still programs, still men who think honor can be coded and humanity can be overwritten. But as long as I'm breathing, they'll never own all of us. This is for the ones who didn't make it. This is for the truth they tried to erase. This is for the blood we share.
You've heard the story.
But the mission never ends. If Jack Reeves' path gripped you, if the shadows he walked made you look twice at your own, then this is where you belong. Honor is earned. Vengeance is chosen. And the stories we tell here, they don't fade. They ignite. So do what matters. Hit that like button. It tells us you're locked in. Subscribe to Honor and Vengeance to stay on mission, because the next chapter is always darker, deeper, and deadlier. Drop a comment below. Who do you trust? What would you do if the past came hunting? And if you've got allies out there, share this with them. We move as one. Until next time, stay sharp, stay silent, and never forget. The past doesn't die quietly. This is Honor and Vengeance, signing off.